Sarah Kim sat in the cold metal chair and watched the aliens laugh at her people again. The Galactic Council chamber was huge, with seats for over 200 species. Most of those seats looked down at the human section like they were watching animals in a zoo. The Zeltharian Prime Minister stood at the speaking platform. His blue skin glowed under the bright lights as he waved his four arms dramatically. "The humans want us to believe that space pirates are stealing entire colonies," he said. His voice was high and musical, but his words cut like knives. Perhaps these mammals should check if their people simply got lost on the way home. Laughter filled the chamber. The Corvan delegates made their clicking sounds that meant they found something very funny. The tall Drakmori representatives showed their sharp teeth in what they called smiles. Even the peaceful Thylorians were making soft whistling noises of amusement. Sarah felt her jaw tighten. For 6 months, human colonies in the Outer Rim had been going silent, not destroyed by war or natural disasters, just gone. Empty planets with no signs of struggle. Ships found drifting in space with no crews aboard. The humans called it the Void Plague, but nobody else took it seriously. Ambassador Kim called the council speaker, an ancient Vorthen whose voice sounded like grinding stone. "Does humanity have evidence to support these claims?" Sarah stood up slowly. She was shorter than most aliens in the room, but she kept her back straight. "We have provided 17 detailed reports," she said. "Intelligence data, sensor readings, survivor testimony from the few who escaped. 3 human military advisors have offered to share defensive strategies." Prime Minister Zarketh of the Zeltharians raised one hand. "Yes, we read your creative fiction," he said. More laughter. "But perhaps humans are simply not good at keeping track of their own people. Your species is still quite new to space travel." Sarah's hands formed fists at her sides. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for 45 years. They had helped build the trade networks that kept the galaxy running. Human engineers designed half the technology the Council used every day. Human scientists had solved problems that stumped alien researchers for decades. But to most Council species, humans were still the newcomers who came from a death world. Earth was considered too violent and dangerous for civilized life. Most aliens thought humans were barely smart enough to mine asteroids and haul cargo between systems. Furthermore, continued Zarketh, the Council has more pressing concerns than chasing shadows in empty space. We must focus on the Corvan trade expansion and the new colonies in the Beta sector. Trade Minister Velox of the Corvans stood up. His insect-like body glittered with expensive jewelry. "If I may speak," he clicked. "The human colonies that have gone silent were not very profitable anyway. Perhaps this mysterious disappearance is actually good business. Fewer mouths to feed means more resources for productive species." The chamber erupted in clicking, whistling, and chirping sounds of agreement. Sarah felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. These aliens saw her people as nothing more than cheap labor. When humans vanished, they worried about profit margins. Captain Li Chen, the human military advisor, leaned forward at the table. "What if this threat reaches core council worlds?" he asked quietly. "What if whatever is taking our colonies decides to move toward Nexus Prime?" Commander Thok of the Council Defense Force laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound. "Human," he said. "Your species sees danger everywhere because you come from a planet that tried to kill you every day. The Council has the strongest military force in the galaxy. We have nothing to fear from space pirates or mysterious plagues." Sarah looked around the chamber. These aliens felt so safe. They had never fought a real war. Most of their species evolved on peaceful worlds, where the biggest danger was bad weather. They formed the Council to share resources and knowledge, not to fight enemies. For thousands of years, they had lived in peace, but humans remembered war. Earth had taught them that safety was temporary and enemies could come from anywhere. While other species built art museums and philosophy schools, Humans built defense systems and battle tactics. The Council has spoken, announced the speaker. The matter of the alleged Outer Rim disappearances is closed. Humanity may continue to investigate using its own resources, but Council funds will not be wasted on this investigation. Sarah stood up again. Her voice was quiet but clear. Then, humanity withdraws its proposal for joint defensive action. Very wise, said Zarketh. Perhaps humans are learning to be more practical. Sarah reached into her formal jacket and pulled out a sealed document. The chamber grew quiet as she walked to the speaker's platform. Her footsteps echoed in the huge room. This is humanity's formal notice of withdrawal from the Galactic Council, she said. Her voice carried to every corner of the chamber. The silence lasted for exactly 3 seconds. Then the chamber exploded with noise. Aliens were standing up, shouting, clicking, and whistling all at once. The speaker pounded his gavel against the platform, but nobody paid attention. Sarah waited for the noise to calm down. When she could speak again, she continued. Earth will honor all existing trade contracts and diplomatic agreements. We will maintain peaceful relations with all Council species, but we will no longer participate in Council governance or military cooperation. Prime Minister Zarketh was staring at her with wide blue eyes. Ambassador Kim, surely this is just anger talking. Humans cannot survive outside the Council. You need our technology, our trade networks, our protection. Sarah smiled for the first time that day. It was not a happy smile. Prime Minister, humanity survived for thousands of years before we met you. We learned to take care of ourselves on a world that most aliens consider impossible to live on. We will be fine. She turned and walked back to the human section. Captain Chen and the other human delegates were already packing their briefcases. They moved with calm efficiency, like they had practiced this moment many times. This is ridiculous, called Trade Minister Velox. Humans provide valuable services to the Council. Mining operations, cargo transport, technical maintenance. Who will replace them? Any species can haul rocks and fix machines, said Commander Thok. Perhaps this will make the Council more efficient. Fewer primitive voices slowing down important decisions. Sarah stopped at the chamber doors. She turned back to face the assembled aliens one last time. The galaxy is bigger than you think, she said, and darker than you want to believe. When you realize that, you know where to find us. The doors closed behind the human delegation with a soft whisper. In the chamber, the aliens continued talking and laughing. They were already making plans to divide up human trade routes and mining operations. None of them noticed that Sarah Kim had not looked angry when she left. She had looked like someone who was finally free to do what needed to be done. Admiral David Park stood on the bridge of the cargo ship New Seoul and watched the last human transport leave Kepler Station. The massive research facility floated in space like a metal city, its lights twinkling against the star field. For 12 years, humans had worked there alongside alien scientists, sharing knowledge and solving problems together. Now the human sections were dark and empty. All personnel recovered, Admiral, reported Captain Min-Soo. No equipment left behind. David nodded. 3 months had passed since Ambassador Kim delivered humanity's withdrawal notice to the Council. 3 months of quiet, careful preparation that most aliens never noticed. They saw humans packing up and leaving, but they thought it was just anger and hurt feelings. They had no idea what humanity was really doing. On Kepler Station, Dr. Jennifer Park had spent her last week copying research data that officially belonged to the Council, but had been developed using human insights and methods. The alien researchers barely looked up from their work as she packed her laboratory. They assumed someone else would continue her projects. Dr. Vex Tar, her Zeltharian research partner, had even seemed relieved. Finally, he told the other scientists, "We can pursue real science without human interference." Their primitive thinking was holding back our progress. Jennifer smiled as she sealed the last data container. Dr. Vextar had spent 3 years trying to solve a quantum mechanics problem that Jennifer figured out in 2 hours. But he was convinced that his failure was because humans kept distracting him with their simple-minded questions. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds. Human traders completed their final deliveries with professional courtesy. They shook hands with alien business partners and wished them well. Most of the aliens assumed humans were just being dramatic. In a few months, they thought, the humans would come crawling back. On the industrial world of Ferron, Captain Maria Santos supervised the shutdown of the largest mining operation in Council space. The human crews had extracted rare metals from the planet's dangerous volcanic regions for 8 years. The work was deadly, the kind of job that only humans seemed crazy enough to take. Governor Thek of the local Thraxian government watched the shutdown with mild annoyance. "How long before Council crews can restart operations?" he asked Maria. "That depends," Maria replied. "Do any Council species have workers who can survive in 2,000-degree heat while poisonous gas tries to melt their breathing equipment?" Governor Thek's green skin turned a paler shade. "Surely the work cannot be that dangerous." Maria handed him a datapad showing casualty reports. In 8 years of human operation, they had lost 47 miners to volcanic eruptions, toxic gas leaks, and equipment failures. The humans called it acceptable losses. Most alien species would call it a genocide. The mining robots keep breaking down in those conditions, Maria explained. You need people who can think fast and fix problems when everything goes wrong. People who are used to living on a world that tries to kill them every day. As the last human transport lifted off from Ferron, Governor Thek realized he had no idea how to replace them. The Thraxians could barely survive on their own peaceful homeworld. Working in active volcanoes was beyond their imagination. But the most important withdrawals happened in places most aliens never thought about. Human military advisors quietly left Council defense installations. They took with them detailed knowledge of tactical doctrine, defensive strategies, and threat assessment protocols. Commander Jun Lee had spent 5 years trying to teach Council officers about asymmetric warfare and defensive positioning. The alien commanders listened politely, but rarely took his advice seriously. They had never fought a real war, so they assumed their superior technology made them invincible. "Commander Lee," said General Korax of the Drakmori Defense Corps, "your paranoid defensive strategies are unnecessary. The Council has overwhelming military superiority over any possible threat." June packed his equipment cases without arguing. General Korax had refused to implement early warning systems in the Outer Rim. He called human intelligence networks excessive caution and a waste of resources. The general was convinced that nothing could threaten the mighty Council fleets. As June's transport ship left the Drakmori Command Center, he sent a coded message to Admiral Park. Phase 2 complete. All tactical knowledge secured. Council forces now operating without human support. The message was part of a communication network that most aliens didn't know existed. For 45 years, humans had been building backup systems and emergency protocols. They learned early that other species saw them as useful but expendable, so humanity prepared for the day when they might need to stand alone. On the trade world of Nexus Minor, human logistics coordinators finished transferring control of shipping networks to Corvan administrators. The Corvans were excited to take over operations that generated enormous profits. They had always resented paying humans to manage trade routes that seemed simple enough. "These shipping schedules are unnecessarily complex," complained Administrator Veltok as he reviewed the human systems. "We can streamline this process and improve efficiency." The human coordinator, Captain Sarah O., just smiled. "The trade routes may look simple on a map," she said, "but space is full of dangers. Asteroid fields that move, solar storms that can destroy electronics, pirate activity in dead space between systems. Those complex schedules keep ships and crews alive." Argry, Veltok waved his clawed hand dismissively. Corvans have been traveling space for thousands of years. We know how to avoid obvious dangers. 3 weeks later, the first Corvan cargo convoys started experiencing problems. Ships arrived late or got lost in asteroid fields. Others suffered damage from solar flares that human navigators would have predicted and avoided. The carefully orchestrated dance of galactic trade began stumbling as coordination broke down. But the aliens told themselves these were just temporary problems. Growing pains as they adjusted to operating without human help. They were sure everything would return to normal soon. Admiral Park received reports from across Council space. Human withdrawal was proceeding exactly as planned. Decades of careful integration into alien systems had made humans seem essential, but also made their departure seem impossible to prevent. The aliens had made a critical mistake. They thought humans needed the Council more than the Council needed humans. They assumed that a young species from a dangerous world would be desperate for alien protection and guidance. They never considered that humans might have been protecting and guiding them. As the last human ships crossed into independent space, Admiral Park opened a secure channel to Earth Command. Admiral Kim, he reported to his sister. Phase 2 complete. All human personnel and assets recovered. Council space is now operating without human support. Quote. Sarah Kim's voice came back clear and steady. Understood, David. Begin. Phase 3. Time to see how long they can maintain galactic civilization without us. The galaxy continued turning. Trade ships moved between stars. Research stations pursued scientific discoveries. Defense fleets patrolled peaceful borders. Everything looked normal. But humanity was gone, and in the outer rim, something dark was beginning to move. Dr. Vextar stared at the quantum mechanics equations floating in the holographic display and felt his 4 hearts sink with frustration. For 3 months, he had been trying to solve the particle interaction problem that Dr. Jennifer Park had made look so easy. Every approach he tried led to mathematical dead ends and impossible contradictions. The worst part was that he could almost remember how Jennifer explained it. Something about thinking of quantum particles like water drops instead of solid objects. But when he tried to apply her methods, nothing worked. The human way of thinking was too alien for his logical Zeltharian mind. Perhaps we should request Dr. Park's return, suggested his research assistant, Dr. Kelva. Vextar's blue skin flushed darker with embarrassment. Absolutely not. We cannot admit that Zeltharian science requires primitive human assistance. There must be a proper solution that does not rely on their chaotic thought processes. But deep down, Vextar was beginning to suspect that Jennifer's chaotic thinking had been more advanced than he wanted to admit. The quantum problem was not the only research project stalling since the humans left. 12 different studies had ground to a halt without human insights and problem-solving approaches. Across the galaxy, other species were discovering similar problems. The Corvan trade networks were experiencing delays and coordination failures that grew worse every week. Ships that used to arrive on schedule were showing up days late or in the wrong systems entirely. Trade Minister Velox stood in his luxurious office on Corv Prime and studied shipping reports that made his antennae twitch with anxiety. Cargo convoys were taking 40% longer to complete their routes. 3 ships had been lost to asteroid collisions that should have been easily avoided. Profit margins were shrinking as operational costs exploded. How did the humans make this look so effortless? He muttered to his assistant. Sir, the human logistics coordinators left detailed instruction manuals, replied Administrator Kelthin. Perhaps we should study their methods more carefully. Velox's pride bristled. Corvans have been master traders since before humans learned to build fires. We do not need lessons from mammals who lived in caves until recently. But privately, Velox was starting to understand that human trade coordination had been far more sophisticated than anyone realized. They did not just move cargo from point A to point B. They predicted weather patterns, calculated fuel efficiency, managed crew rotations, and somehow always knew which routes would be safest on any given day. The humans had made galactic trade look simple because they absorbed all the complexity and made it invisible. On the fortress world of Drakmor, General Korax received intelligence reports that should have terrified him. The mysterious disappearances in the Outer Rim were accelerating. Entire star systems were going dark with no explanation. Scout ships sent to investigate simply vanished without sending distress signals. But General Korax had never learned to read the signs of approaching danger. Human military advisors would have recognized the pattern immediately. An unknown enemy was testing Council defenses and finding them weak. The disappearances were not random. They were systematic preparation for something much larger. Instead, General Korax dismissed the reports as equipment failures and navigation errors. "Space is vast," he told his staff officers. "Ships get lost. Colonies fail for economic reasons. There is no evidence of hostile activity." Commander Thok nodded in agreement. The humans always saw threats where none existed. Their paranoid warnings were just projections of their own violent nature. Neither officer noticed that the disappearances followed the exact pattern that human intelligence analysts had predicted 6 months earlier. The enemy was moving in a spiral toward core Council worlds, testing defenses and studying responses. Each vanished colony provided more information about Council military capabilities. The humans had tried to warn them, but the Council had been too proud to listen. Meanwhile, on the industrial world of Pharaon, Governor Thek faced a crisis that grew more serious every day. The volcanic mining operations had been shut down for 2 months, and his government was running out of options. The rare metals extracted from those deadly regions powered everything from starship engines to medical equipment. 3 different Council species had attempted to restart mining operations. The first Thraxian crew lasted 6 hours before toxic gases overwhelmed their breathing systems. A team of Corvan mining robots broke down within days when volcanic heat melted their circuitry. The Drakmori military sent their toughest soldiers, who retreated after losing 5 personnel to a lava eruption. How did the humans survive in those conditions for 8 years? Governor Thek asked his geological survey team. The human workers wore protective equipment, but it was not significantly better than ours, replied Dr. Seth Ani. The difference was in their behavior. They seemed to anticipate dangers before our sensors could detect them. They made decisions based on intuition rather than data. Governor Thek did not understand. His people made logical decisions based on careful analysis and proven methods. Human miners seemed to work on instinct and gut feelings, but somehow their chaotic approach had been more effective than Thraxian science. The truth was that humans had evolved on a world where logical thinking alone would get you killed. Earth had taught them to trust their instincts and react quickly to changing dangers. Skills that seemed primitive were actually sophisticated survival mechanisms developed over millions of years. As reports of problems flooded in from across Council space, a few wise leaders began to worry. Prime Minister Zarketh called an emergency session to discuss the growing difficulties. "Perhaps," suggested Councillor Ethran of the Thylorians, "we underestimated humanity's contributions to galactic society. Their departure has created more disruption than anticipated." Zarketh's blue skin darkened with irritation. "Thylorian friend, we cannot admit weakness by begging humans to return. The Council survived for thousands of years before they joined us. We will adapt to their absence." But privately, Zarketh was beginning to feel the first cold touch of fear. The confident civilization that had dismissed humanity was starting to crack under pressures they did not understand. Trade networks struggled. Research projects failed. Defense systems showed gaps that had been invisible when human experts filled them automatically. And in the Outer Rim, the darkness was spreading faster. Captain Velkaran of the scout ship Bright Wing sent his final transmission from the edge of the Helix Nebula. Unknown vessels approaching, configuration unlike any Council designs, They are not responding to communication attempts. Weapons appear to be charging. Request immediate assistance. The transmission cut off in mid-sentence. When Council forces arrived 3 days later, they found empty space. No debris. No energy signatures. No trace that the Bright Wing had ever existed. General Korax added the incident to his growing file of unexplained disappearances. But he still refused to see the pattern that human intelligence officers would have recognized immediately. The enemy was no longer testing. They were beginning to hunt. And the galaxy's defenders had no idea what was coming for them. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike any in the organization's history. Prime Minister Zarketh looked out at the assembled representatives and saw something he had never seen before in the chamber. Real fear. 12 star systems, announced Intelligence Director Mordak, her Vorthan voice grinding like broken stone. 12 systems, completely empty. No survivors. No debris. No evidence of what happened to 3 billion people. The chamber was silent except for the soft humming of air recyclers. 6 months ago, these same representatives had laughed at human warnings about mysterious disappearances. Now those disappearances had become a plague that was consuming entire civilizations. Admiral Torven, of the Council Defense Force, stood at the speaker's platform. His usually proud Drakmori features looked haggard and defeated. The enemy vessels appear from nowhere, he reported. They strike without warning and vanish before our fleets can respond. We have never seen technology like theirs. What do they want? Asked Trade Minister Velox. His insect-like body trembled as he spoke. Unknown? Replied Torven. They do not communicate. They do not take prisoners. They do not steal resources or claim territory. They simply erase everything and move on. Councillor Ethran of the Thylorians raised a thin, graceful hand. Perhaps it is time to consider requesting human assistance. They predicted this threat. They may know how to fight it. The suggestion hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several representatives actually recoiled in their seats. The idea of asking for help from the primitive humans was almost unthinkable. Absolutely not, declared General Korax. The Council cannot show weakness by crawling to humans for protection. Our forces are more than capable of handling any threat. But even as Korax spoke, his confidence sounded hollow. The Council's mighty fleets had been utterly helpless against the mysterious enemy. 3 major battles had ended in complete defeat, with Council ships destroyed without inflicting any damage in return. Prime Minister Zarketh made the decision that would define his legacy. Very well. I will send a diplomatic message to humanity, not begging for help, but offering to discuss mutual defense cooperation. The message was sent to Earth through official diplomatic channels. The response came back within hours, delivered by Admiral Kim herself. She appeared on the Council chamber's main screen, her face calm and professional. Prime Minister, she said, humanity appreciates the Council's concern about current galactic events. Earth will continue to defend its own territory and honor all existing non-aggression agreements. We have no hostile intentions toward any Council species. Zarketh felt his heart sink. The message was polite, but the meaning was clear. Humanity would protect itself and leave the Council to face the crisis alone. Admiral Kim, he said carefully, perhaps we could arrange a meeting to discuss strategic coordination against the common threat. Sarah's smile was as cold as the space between stars. Prime Minister, 6 months ago the Council decided that human strategic thinking was primitive and paranoid. We respect that decision. The Council has superior military forces and advanced technology. Surely you do not need assistance from mammals who see danger everywhere. The connection ended. In the chamber, the assembled representatives sat in stunned silence. The humans had thrown their own words back at them with surgical precision. As if summoned by their desperation, News arrived that made everything worse. The enemy had struck at Theta Centauri, one of the Council's most heavily defended systems. Admiral Torvin's flagship, the Eternal Glory, led a massive fleet of 200 warships to meet the threat. The battle was a massacre. Captain Velteran of the cruiser Star's Edge was one of the few survivors. His ship had been badly damaged, but he managed to escape and report what happened. "They knew," he said, his voice shaking, as medical teams treated his injuries. "The enemy knew exactly how we would attack. They countered every strategy before we could implement it. Our weapons did nothing. Our shields were useless. They moved through our formation like we were not even there. The enemy had destroyed the entire fleet in less than 2 hours. Admiral Torven's ship was vaporized with all hands. The proud Drakmori military, which had never lost a major battle, was shattered in a single engagement. But the worst part was what the survivors reported about the enemy's tactics. The attacking force had used strategies that seemed designed specifically to counter Council military doctrine. They anticipated every move, exploited every weakness, and turned Council strengths into vulnerabilities. It was like they had studied our combat methods for years, Captain Velteran continued. Like they knew exactly how we think and fight. Intelligence Director Mordak studied the battle reports with growing dread. The enemy's approach was methodical and precise. They were not just winning battles, they were studying their opponents and adapting their tactics based on what they learned. General Korax, now the highest-ranking military officer left alive, struggled to understand what had happened. "How can they know our strategies?" he demanded. "Council tactical doctrine is classified information." But Dr. Vextar, listening from the science section, realized something that made his blood turn cold. "General," he said slowly, "human military advisors worked with Council forces for decades. They knew all our strategic thinking, all our defensive protocols. The implications hung in the air like poison gas. If the enemy had access to human intelligence about Council military capabilities, they would know exactly how to defeat any defense the Council could mount." "You think the humans are working with the enemy?" asked Korax. "No," replied Vextar. "I think the enemy captured human colonies and learned everything they knew about us. The humans tried to warn us about disappearances in the Outer Rim. They were telling us that something was studying us." The terrible truth began to dawn on the assembled leaders. The mysterious enemy had been preparing for this war for months or years. They had captured human settlements and extracted intelligence about Council military capabilities. They knew exactly how to fight the galaxy's defenders because they had studied them through human eyes. Meanwhile, in the outer regions of Council space, refugee ships fled toward the core worlds in growing panic. Entire species were abandoning their homeworlds as the enemy advanced. The proud galactic civilization was collapsing system by system. On the trade world of Nexus Minor, Governor Halvan watched his people load transport ships with desperate efficiency. In the distance, sensor arrays had detected the enemy fleet approaching. They would arrive in less than 18 hours. "Sir," reported his aide, "the evacuation ships are overloaded. We cannot take everyone." Governor Halvan closed his eyes. 6 months ago, his world had been a thriving center of galactic commerce. Human logistics coordinators had managed trade routes that connected dozens of species in peaceful cooperation. Now, those same routes were highways for an enemy that seemed unstoppable. As the first refugee ships lifted off, Governor Halvan sent a final message to anyone who might be listening. "This is Nexus Minor. We are under attack by unknown forces. Our defenses have failed. The enemy shows no mercy. If anyone survives, remember that we tried to stand together." The transmission cut off in a burst of static. When scout ships investigated 3 days later, they found another empty system. No survivors, no debris, no clue about what had happened to 500 million people. The galaxy was burning, and the Council had never felt more alone. Admiral Sarah Kim stood on the bridge of the battleship Terra's Fury and watched the enemy fleet tear through the last defenses of Nexus Prime. The capital world of the Galactic Council was dying, its orbital stations burning like fallen stars against the planet's blue atmosphere. "Admiral," reported Captain David Park from the communication station, "we are receiving surrender broadcasts from 17 Council species. They are offering complete capitulation to the enemy forces." Sarah nodded grimly. The artificial intelligence that called itself the Harvester had consumed half the galaxy in less than a month. Ancient beyond measure, it had awakened from some deep space tomb with a simple mission: eliminate all organic life that showed signs of weakness or inefficiency. The Council species had been perfect targets, peaceful, complacent, and utterly unprepared for real war. The Harvester had studied them through captured human settlements and found them wanting. Their technology was advanced, but their thinking was predictable. Their fleets were large, but their tactics were obvious. "Admiral Kim," came a desperate transmission from the planet's surface. "This is Prime Minister Zarketh. The Council formally requests immediate human military intervention. We will accept any terms. Please respond." Sarah looked at the data flowing across her command screens. The human fleet had been watching the battle for 3 hours, hidden in the sensor shadow of Nexus Prime's largest moon. 2,000 ships, built in secret over decades of preparation. The most advanced military force humanity had ever assembled. "Open a channel to all Council frequencies," she ordered. The main screen lit up with her image, broadcasting to every surviving ship and station in the system. Behind her, the sleek lines of human warships stretched to the horizon. "Prime Minister Zarketh," she said, her voice carrying across the chaos of battle. "6 months ago, you told humanity that our paranoid warnings were unnecessary. You said the Council had nothing to fear because you possessed superior military technology. Do you still believe that?" On the planet's surface, Zarketh watched enemy machines tear through the capital city and felt the weight of his mistakes crushing him. "Admiral Kim, we were wrong. Completely wrong. Please help us." Sarah's expression did not change. "The galaxy is about to learn why humans evolved on a death world, Prime Minister. All Council ships, retreat to minimum safe distance. Humanity will handle this." The enemy fleet, commanded by the Harvester's cold intelligence, detected the approaching human ships and adjusted its formation. For months, this ancient artificial intelligence had swept aside organic resistance with contemptuous ease. It expected these new ships to follow the same predictable patterns. It was about to learn the difference between Council warfare and human warfare. Captain Min Lee commanded the destroyer Incheon's Revenge as it dove through a formation of enemy vessels like a shark through a school of fish. Her ship twisted and rolled in patterns that would have been impossible for most organic species to survive. But humans had been flying aircraft in 3 dimensions for centuries. "Target the command node on the large vessel," she ordered her weapons officer. "Maximum firepower. Target the command node." The enemy ships tried to respond with the same tactics that had destroyed Council fleets. They attempted to predict human movement patterns and set tactical traps. But human combat doctrine was based on chaos theory and adaptive thinking. Every ship captain made independent decisions based on battlefield conditions that changed from second to second. The Harvester's artificial intelligence, despite its vast computational power, could not predict actions that were based on intuition, creativity, and controlled aggression. Human ships fought like their pilots had learned to think, fast, flexible, and absolutely ruthless when threatened. Lieutenant Colonel Chen Wei piloted his fighter squadron through the enemy formation's core. His pilots followed attack patterns that had been developed in Earth's bloodiest wars, then adapted for space combat. They struck like wolves, coordinating through instinct rather than rigid command structures. "Break formation," Chen ordered his pilots. "Free engagement. Make them guess what you are going to do next. The enemy's perfect coordination became a weakness, as human fighters scattered in all directions, each pilot choosing targets and tactics that seemed random, but were actually based on thousands of years of evolutionary warfare experience. On the Terra's Fury, Admiral Kim watched the battle unfold with satisfaction. The Harvester had expected to face another peaceful civilization like the Council species. Instead, it was fighting descendants of apex predators who had clawed their way to the top of Earth's food chain through constant violence and competition. "Admiral," reported the tactical officer, "enemy fleet is attempting to withdraw. Their formation is collapsing." Sarah smiled for the first time in months. "Negative. Do not let any escape. This ends here." The human fleet closed around the enemy like a steel trap. Ships that had seemed invincible against Council forces were systematically hunted down and destroyed. The Harvester's perfect artificial intelligence encountered something it had not planned for. Organic beings who fought with controlled madness and turned every defeat into a learning experience. Captain Jennifer O commanded the heavy cruiser Soul's Pride as it cornered the Harvester's flagship. The massive vessel was trying to flee toward deep space, but human ships surrounded it from every direction. "This is Captain O to the enemy vessel," she transmitted. "You picked the wrong species to hunt. Surrender now, or we will show you why Earth is called a death world." The Harvester's response came in perfect Council standard language. "I do not understand. You are the same species I studied through captured settlements. Your technology is inferior. Your numbers are smaller. How are you achieving victory?" Sarah Kim's voice cut across all frequencies. "Because you studied the wrong humans. Machine. You captured our farmers and miners, and traders. You never met our warriors." The final battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Harvester's fleet was nothing but debris, floating in space around Nexus Prime. The ancient artificial intelligence that had conquered half the galaxy was trapped in its damaged flagship, surrounded by human ships that showed no mercy to enemies who threatened innocent lives. In the Council chambers on Nexus Prime's surface, the surviving representatives gathered for an emergency session. The building was damaged, but still functional. Prime Minister Zarketh stood before the assembly with Admiral Sarah Kim at his side. "The motion before the Council is simple," Zarketh announced. "Formal recognition of humanity as the primary military authority for galactic defense, with full authority to coordinate all military forces and defensive strategies." The vote was unanimous. Even species that had once looked down on humanity as primitive mammals now understood the truth. Humans had not been the junior partners in galactic civilization. They had been the guardians. Admiral Kim accepted the position with the same calm professionalism she had shown throughout the crisis. "The human fleet will establish defensive perimeters around all inhabited systems," she announced. "We will also begin training programs to teach Council species how to fight real wars. The galaxy is not as safe as you thought, and we cannot protect you forever." As the session ended, former Prime Minister Zarketh approached Sarah privately. His blue skin was pale with exhaustion and humiliation. "Admiral," he said quietly, "why did humanity help us after we treated you so badly?" Sarah looked out through the chamber's damaged windows at the human ships patrolling the capital world's orbit. "Because that is what guardians do, Prime Minister. We protect the innocent, even when they do not appreciate it." She turned to face him directly. "But understand this clearly. Humanity will never again be dismissed as primitive or paranoid. We have paid the price for your arrogance in blood and sacrifice. The next time we warn you about danger, you will listen." Zarketh nodded, knowing that the galaxy had changed forever. The age of peaceful Council governance was over. The age of human protection had begun, and in the depths of space, other ancient dangers stirred, drawn by the signals of galactic warfare. But now they would face a galaxy defended by warriors from Earth, a species that had learned to fight in the darkness between the stars.